Yeah, next on Sunday. So, all right. Are you seeing up the screen and everything, Michael?
Sure am.
All right.
I see your title card.
Now you should see the class, right?
Correct.
All right. Just so if you don't know who Michael is, he is a friend of mine. He's a pastor in Indiana. And you can't see him, so you can just hear him. So they can't see even if you turn on your camera, Michael.
I thought maybe his screen was frozen right there.
Yeah, he's George Fox.
I thought it was a bullfrog.
That's Jeremiah. He's closer to George Fox than I'd ever be, so. All right, let me get my stuff open and we will start. And I don't have a whole lot this week because I've been out helping Mark Fawcett get some errands done while he's sick. So, and his wife is sick and in the hospital, so he needs an extra set of hands. So we read chapter 4, and it was 1650 to 1651 as the general timeline. And he remained in the same general area of central England. I didn't put a map out this time because I didn't have the time, so. Alright, Dayton and Taylor aren't going to be here, so that's what I already thought.
Oh, the thingies.
I know, those are cool. Can we talk about those real quick?
Yeah,
What are they?
they're heaters.
What are you going to do with them?
Hand them out to homeless people
Once we finish them.
once they're finished.
We got
Michael hasn't seen them yet, so let's get to a big screen here.
I think I have seen them. They're the alcohol heaters that heat up copper,
Yes.
Yep.
right?
Yep. I was on copper bending duty, so not a single one of those is bent the same way. I'm not a machine.
I can't light it
You're only
this time
part.
because I didn't bring a
Wow.
lighter, but that's what it looks like.
Neat.
Can you see it at all, Michael?
Yeah, I see you have a flower pot for a ceramic heat sink
Yeah.
to keep it from just making hot air that goes straight up.
Yes, and it works pretty good. So anyway,
Yeah, if you've got just a little enclosure, I imagine it makes a convenient little space heater.
yeah. And if you move it too fast, it'll automatically go out. So
Can you have it in an enclosed space?
yes, because alcohol doesn't produce as much carbon monoxide. They can't say that it doesn't produce any because there could be impurities in it.
Cool.
So, all right. So the first quote that I have,
So we were making these and there's still 4 there and 2 there.
yeah, I have to drill holes in them yet to let the vapor out. Put the wicks in, and then put the enclosure around it. So, but it's pretty. They're pretty much the hard part Now the time of my commitment of the House of Corrections being nearly ended, and there being many new soldiers raised, and commissioners would have made me captain over them, and the soldiers said they would have none but me. So the keeper of the House of Corrections was commanded to bring me before the commissioners and soldiers in the marketplace, and there they offered me that preferment, as they called it, asking me if I would not take up arms for the Commonwealth against Charles Stuart. So here is where he's beginning that the Civil War is going on, and they're asking him to become one of their leaders within the Civil War. I told them, making sure I have the right slide up, I knew from whence all wars arose, even from the lust according to James's doctrine, and that I lived in the virtue of that life and power that took away all occasion for all wars. But they courted me to accept their offer, and though I did but compliment them, but I told them I was come into the covenant of peace, which was before wars and strifes were. They said they offered it in love and kindness to me, because of my virtue, and such like flattering words they used. But I told them if that was their love and kindness, I trampled it under my feet. Then their rage got up, and they said, "Take him away, jailer, and put him into the dungeon amongst the rogues and felons." So I was had away and put into a lousy, stinking place, without any bed, amongst 30 felons, where I was kept almost half a year, unless it were at times, for they would sometimes let me walk in the garden, having a belief that I would not go away.
I'm wondering if he's literally speaking lousy also.
I thought about that too.
So either wore wigs back then.
Leslie's trying to get on the Zoom too, so
I bet that is what they meant. Full ice.
It's entirely possible.
we're just all sorts of scatterbrained today. So the men of the community wished to have George lead their military company. And this is probably not like the actual army, but something more like the National Guard. So I don't remember what David called them, but the Home Guard or something like that. So why did Fox reject their offer?
Very anti-war, anything related to that.
Yeah, thinks it's unchristian.
He prioritized peace over war.
Yeah. So what's this doctrine of James?
I'm not sure what he's talking about there. But I thought maybe he was talking about the Bible somewhere
Mm-hmm.
in James.
It's a good guess.
Yeah. Could be.
I'm forgetting this. I didn't read that far yet. I'm a little behind on the reading, sorry.
You're good. I don't know why
Listen, the first
my
chapter.
screen doesn't follow what's on the other screen. So it comes from James chapter 3:13 through 4:12 approximately. So James says, "Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, Do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not for wisdom that comes down from above. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. And what causes quarrels, and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and you do not receive because you ask wrongly, to spend it on your passions. You adulterous people. Do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you suppose it is to no purpose that Scripture says he yearns jealously over the Spirit that he has made to dwell in us? But he gives more grace. Therefore it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wretched and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. Do not speak evil against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not doers of the law, but a judge. There is only one lawgiver and judge, who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? So, what does that, if that's the doctrine of James, what does it say?
I see how he took that and said, I'm not going to, or just understanding like the only purpose of war is to gain power and, resources. And so, I mean, yeah, I think it's pretty clear. I think you can take that and say, well, war is not of God.
So, and if you think of the English Civil War, you have the people trying to take over the king and toss him out because he was a tyrant. So it's I can see how some people could justify it, but what are they actually trying to get? Are they reforming and giving everything back to the people, or are they just replacing one tyrant with another? And unfortunately, what history proved is they replaced one tyrant with another, because Cromwell was a tyrant.
Monty Python made an entire song about him.
Yeah. So,
And by 1650, this would be the Second Civil War.
right.
Cromwell had control for close to a decade at this point.
Yeah.
Charles I had been in exile, and he raises an army supported by Scotland, trying to return.
And then he eventually gets killed. And then they
Yeah,
have another.
In 51.
And then they have a third civil war, and Charles II comes into power then again.
Yeah, the
Cromwell
second
lost about
one.
a foot of height too.
The what?
Oliver Cromwell lost about a foot of height too.
Yeah, he did. Off with his head.
At this point, was George Fox and the whole movement kind of known for having like a peace testimony or whatever?
It was just beginning.
So it wasn't really like.
So they wanted him to join the military earlier, and he refused. So this is just kind of showing how he's developing that doctrine of peace, or that testimony of peace.
Did they actually want him like in a military position, or did they want him to like endorse it?
They wanted him as an officer.
Did he have a background?
No.
They
So
wanted him to do that.
they wanted him because he was honest. So they figured if we put this honest guy in front of us, then he's going to take care of us and make sure we have what we need.
Also, all the people considered him a virtuous man, and the soldiers really wanted him to lead them.
Yeah. So, I mean, you do, if you're going into battle, and I can't speak to this at all because I am not a military person, but you would want somebody that you can trust. And that's bold and wouldn't back down and will stand up for you and for the good. So a lot of what George Fox had, he was a very powerful, charismatic teacher. So in a lot of ways, I can see exactly why they'd want him, because he would speak truth to power, and if there was something that they shouldn't be doing, he'd stand up to the other generals or leaders and say, no, we're not sending our guys there. so I can see a lot of it.
If you know someone's got your back, you're more willing to put yourself in danger because you know they'll try to pull you out of it.
Yeah. So how does the two statements, the quotes from Fox and that section of scripture, how do they kind of reflect one another? Can you see any reflection there? I mean, he pretty much says it almost word for word. It's your lust that's doing this. You want this power. And yeah, it's for the people of Parliament, but you
Is it
want the
really?
power.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So what does Fox imply is the root of the struggle going on around him?
Earthly desires.
Yeah, the desires and greed.
Having civil wars and taking it left and right on that whole thing, on who was in charge of the country and the church,
Mm-hmm.
because that whole Church of England stuff too eventually became an issue too.
So if we think of most wars, can you see how what James had to say ties into that? If you look at World War I, what was the main reason for that struggle? You had
Militarism, authoritarianism,
Yeah.
nationalism,
The spark was the
assassination.
yeah, and then a bunch of countries that had given and had sworn allegiance and alliance, they were held to their word and they kicked in.
And how were all those nations ruled?
Monarchs, mostly.
They're all empires run by monarchs. And they wanted
Some of them
to
were
keep,
even related.
most of them were related.
Yeah.
So, and it said that the only reason World War I was fought is because England's queen died. So she was the family member that kept them from going to war, because she was everybody's grandmother. So once she died, then they went at each other. And they're all empires. They wanted more control over more land, and that gave them more power and more influence. And so you can look at the greed and you can see it right in there. You can look at the lust and it's right in there. They were all related. Why were they all related? because they wanted to keep all the power to themselves. Then you go to the next World War. Again, what was being sought in that World War?
Japan was trying to take over China. Germany, that was,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the whole Holocaust thing was a thing.
Yeah.
Germany was feeling,
They were having some financial issues, and they
And they
they didn't want communism, but they wanted communism light or something like that. They wanted Nazism as opposed to communism. There was apparently a difference,
they felt like they were being oppressed.
and they didn't like capitalism either because it apparently had failed them the first time, as far as they could tell.
yeah, they were being punished from World War I, so
Right.
they hated that, and
And nobody was listening to them.
they wanted national pride.
And they wanted to return some sort of pride.
They made a movie, Metropolis, like a few years before that whole thing started, and showing that they knew that the soul of their country was at stake.
Mm-hmm. So that desire for power and return to what you once were, and it's, and James says you ask, but you ask incorrectly because you want it for your own selfish desires. So a lot of what James had to say in that passage of scripture, you can read, you can see it in how the people were living their lives during that time frame. So what about more contemporary wars? Not to step on any toes, but war in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Afghanistan was definitely a reaction to 9/11.
Right.
We did some other stuff while we were there, which, like, deposed the Taliban who were backing him. We did. If the mission was just him, we definitely got him.
Yeah.
If there was more to it than that, then that's actually well beyond my scope to say on that.
But
And if the whole war in Iraq was all about oil, then it was a total failure. If that's the case,
yeah,
because gas prices doubled in the 10 months I was gone.
yeah,
But that wasn't the reason for it. There was other things going on there too. Like,
yeah.
That doesn't make it a failure though.
well, if you're trying to
If you're trying to stabilize the gas prices and they
the
double,
gas
then
prices
maybe.
literally doubled in a 10-month
Yeah, but
period.
that doesn't make it a failure.
Yeah.
If that was the only goal, it was a failure. But we knew that Saddam Hussein had come to power by literally killing off all of his political opponents, televising it while he did it,
Mm-hmm.
gassing over 300,000 people, which is more than we deployed against him. And
So there's people seeking power still,
right,
and people wanting those people not to have power. But instead of talking to them and working it out, we're going to force you to do it.
power shouldn't be the goal; it should be the means.
So,
If anything,
So-
if anything,
and if you do the Russia-Ukraine war as well, you can see a lot of the same patterns going through. So, in what ways would James' teaching encourage us to handle a struggle between individuals and then between nations? Because a lot of people think, well, I can see it when you're dealing with individuals, but nations is something totally different. But is it?
nations are basically big kids,
Yeah. We're still all people, right?
possibly very ill-tempered kids.
So how would James say that we should try to handle a struggle?
I think identifying the real motivation and cause for what's going on, and not getting carried away with nationalistic and ideological ideas that are maybe not the actual reason that conflicts are happening. Like you're at a, Superman race or whatever.
Yeah. So we have to look at what our own desires are. So you desire and you do not have. So why am I wanting what I'm wanting? And is this something that's worth killing somebody else over? Would I kill the person living next to me to get their house? Because that's what the Empire Wars were about. They wanted the land. That's the same thing as you killing your neighbor to get their house. Is that right? You're just taking more houses.
How do you bring that says yes?
A great deal has to do with ego and the feeling that I am more deserving of this than they are.
Yeah. And why is that? Why am I more deserving of this?
People use all kinds of justifications.
So in the king's case, he has the divine right to rule, right? God has given him this mandate that he is supposed to lead the people, or she, if she's a queen. And you can't question my authority because God is speaking through me. And then on the more democratic side of things, we have the best philosophy of governance, so we need to spread it all over the world. I think our system's great, but do I have the right to tell somebody that has never lived under this system that they need to do that if they don't have the tools to do it? So
I've shown you this questionnaire I wrote, right?
The hardest thing to think about is peace. I mean, that's a good thing to want, but why? And I don't know. Maybe it's just extrapolating too much, if that's the right word, to say like you ask for things, but you're asking for it for the wrong reason, or maybe you're going about it the wrong way. Maybe this doesn't quite relate, but I just think of like, oh, it's ensuring peace for your neighbors, for your country. Making a show of force to people you feel are threatening or are threatening,
yeah.
or even damaging. Is it okay just so that you can feel peaceful in your own land? Is it okay to bring terror to another land so that you can feel peaceful in your own land?
It's something to think about for sure. But yeah, I think that you ask and you do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. I think that does have something to do with it.
It's definitely preferable to, if you're going to have to fight, to not be fighting on your homeland.
Preferable, but is it right? Do you
Not the ideal situation.
Do you have the right to fight on somebody else's land? It's not yours.
I think most of us, like especially our government, just they feel like they have to plan for the worst. What is it like? And so, in thinking that way, you have to operate under a mindset of fear. What's the worst that can happen, and how are we going to defend against it? Where like, I don't know, like you guys probably imagine like what would you do if someone broke into your house? Most of the time, I imagine how I'm going to beat this person up, or what weapon am I going to grab? But how often do you think, like, imagine turning to Jesus for someone breaking into your house?
Yeah.
Not as often in my personal thought life.
So is there a place for conflict?
It has to be for the right reasons, and that's really hard to determine sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, there can be.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, like George Fox. Yeah, I mean, if we're going by his example, there is a place for conflict, just not physical violence.
Yeah.
Just
And anybody heard any updates on that shooting that just happened?
I haven't heard any updates on that. So there
Didn't sound right.
there probably is a place for conflict. But how should we go about it? Because you can't, if you're standing for what's right, then you have to stand firm.
Are
The
you
whole-
actually defending someone,
the
or are you
whole-
going on offense for no reason?
Yeah, the whole verse of turn your other cheek doesn't mean that you're backing down. It means you're going to stay and you're going to take another hit. So, because you're standing and you're turning the other cheek. And when you're dealing with like a bully, how do you deal with a bully at school?
They're usually pretty cowardly when someone actually stands up to them.
I mean, you homeschool your kids, so it's not a good example.
Well, yeah,
but-
but we all deal with bullies, and I went to I went to public school, and there's homeschool bullies as well. It's called their dad. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, how many bullies have we all dealt with? Like, who stood up to a bully and had him back down from them? Like they were gonna beat them up, but instead of beating you up, they said, "Never mind, I'm cowardly. I'm gonna walk away."
I've
Oh.
done it multiple times. So,
Have they beaten you up before? Is there like a history of physical
Oh, yeah.
beatings?
one of
Some
my
have
bullies
tried.
is my best friend now became my best friend in grade school
Some have
because
tried.
I didn't back down and he expected me to,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to fight either. I wrestled him just to
You wrestled them?
make sure that he
Sounds like fun.
and tried to wrestled as much so he didn't hurt me, but then pushed him away. And it's like, I don't want to fight. And eventually he got it through his head that no, I'm not going to back down, but I'm not going to actually hurt him either, because I just wanted to stop the fight.
I mean, what about the Cold War and the arms race? Was that us not backing down from a bully? Was
Pretty
that
much,
right?
yeah.
Was that a good thing? That we
Yeah.
have lots of nuclear weapons?
That's debatable.
Yeah.
So,
There's multiple YouTube channels of military veterans specifically talking about that and things that have come from that.
I just feel like relying on someone else's cowardice and our bravery is earthly.
yeah.
It's not, I think there's just a supernatural reality of Jesus, and that's something else to rely on.
So that you ask, but you ask wrongly. So the nuclear arms race is probably one of those examples where we're trying to build up and we're not going to back down, but we're going to keep building up the weapons. Are we actually trying to broker peace by doing that? Or are we just bringing things just a little closer to where once we do fight, everything's going to be annihilated? So that's one of those, you're using it for your own selfish or your own greed. So what would have been a different way to have done that, now that we're looking at it from hindsight? I don't know if there could have been a different way.
I'm not coming up with any readily available options that they hadn't already tried, and it failed miserably on their attempts on that. The mutually assured destruction, while definitely terrifying on if it ever actually happens, was apparently a decent enough deterrent that we're still here.
Yeah. And I've been over in a former Soviet country, and they had videos playing in their schools, just like we had in our schools, where evil America is going to nuclear bomb us and we need to hide under our desks. It's eerie just how similar the videos were with different characters. So it's really strange. But what James is telling us is we should always try something else. If we're not getting what we want, take a different approach. Try something different. Something that doesn't try everything possible that you can before you get to that violent state, because the violence
That
is
should be your-
always wrong in his case.
That should be your absolute last resort. And if it's not your last resort, you didn't use enough of it when you did use it, as the saying goes. But
Yeah.
whether you agree with that or not, that's how the saying goes.
So how did the community respond to Fox?
Well, when he turned down their thing and was saying, your mind of thought's evil, yeah, they got mad pretty quickly.
At first, they tried flattering him,
Mhm.
giving him compliments and talking sweetly to him, offering him things.
Yeah. And later in the chapter, he was offered money multiple times.
But like before that, they didn't like him, right? They threw him in jail, right?
Yeah, they threw him in jail, but they saw while he was in jail that he is honorable. They gave him basically his freedom. They're like, yeah, you can go a mile from the jail, come back. And he kept coming back. He didn't leave the jailer out to explain why he let this person go, even though they basically gave him an invitation to, here, escape, here's the key. So they knew he was honorable and trustworthy because of how he responded to his first jailing. Or may not have been his first jailing, I can't remember, but to that jailing. And then he goes, they need him to help with the war effort, so they want him to lead them, which is bizarre. And then he says no, and they throw him into jail again with the robbers and the felons and the thieves and all that.
I wonder if they sort
It
of
really
said-
isn't as bizarre as you think that they offer him an officership. Are you familiar with Edward Burroughs?
I've heard the name.
He would have been remembered as bigger than Barclay and Penn if he would have lived. He was one of Oliver Cromwell's officers who served with Oliver Cromwell directly. At one point, he was the standard bearer.
Yeah.
Like a number of soldiers and officers in Cromwell's army, after Cromwell won, he became disillusioned.
Yeah.
You know, he really thought he was doing God's work and would bring reform to the church, among other things. And it didn't usher in the millennial kingdom the way people thought it would.
Yeah.
This is round 2 of the Civil War. And since the disillusioned people, a number of them, are listening to and following Fox, his endorsement of Cromwell in the Second Civil War would be very beneficial.
Yeah. So Michael, we're running out of time, so just re-log in on the same code and you should come back in, okay? Wow, literally.
Okay. You think he heard that?
I hope so.
Is this being live on
Yeah.
YouTube right now? Or, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying earlier, that they were kind of hoping for his like political endorsement as this kind of Christ.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Spiritual character.
Yeah, they wanted him to be
Right.
To give the okay on their side.
basically to become Cromwell for him, so
Like a figurehead.
yeah. So what's the current stance among friends? This is what's in the Faith and Practice. You want to read it for me, Tracy, so I can tell Michael that he can re-log in right quick?
After it was noised abroad that I was in Durban dungeon, my relatives came to see me again, and they were much troubled that I should be in prison, for they looked upon it to be a great shame to them for me to be in prison for religion. And some thought I was mad because I advocated purity and righteousness and perfection.
Okay, I went too far.
Yeah, I was wondering what.
There we
Okay,
go. Read
there
that
we-
one.
Okay. I read what was on the screen.
Yeah. So current stance on this issue among friends, and this is from the Faith and Practice, which we recently revised a couple of years ago. Peace and war. Friends feel that life is sacred and that war and violence are not consistent with Christian principles. And we get that from Matthew 5:38 through 48. This is a firm conviction that war is wrong as a method of settling disputes, destructive of our highest values, and productive of seeds of future wars. We therefore, as a church, unequivocally support young friends who as conscientious objectors to war, refuse military service. And we are concerned to find alternative solutions based upon justice and righteousness for all peoples, and are deeply moved to participate in the new calls to peacemaking, which are being sounded in our day. At the same time, we support and pray for individuals and their families serving in our armed forces.
Or if we go into the military, we go medical generally.
Yeah. So how does our current stance reflect Fox and what James, the doctrine of James that Fox talks about?
For the most part, we just don't take part. I'm definitely an exception on that. But I went there as a medic on the idea that, yeah, war's stupid. I'm trying to make sure that you get through it and survive and realize it's stupid.
So when I first moved to Kansas City, I was invited by a homeschool cooperative to teach about Friends in one of their religion classes. And they're like, "Oh, you don't believe in war, right?" It's like, no, we believe in war. Saying we don't believe in war is like saying you don't believe in, Santa Claus or something like that. Or war exists. So we believe that war is there. We have a testimony opposing war, meaning we don't want it to happen. And we should do everything that we can to try to prevent it from happening.
Again, violence should be last resort. It's not a good option. And if you didn't use it, and if it's not your last resort, you didn't use it right.
And when war does happen, we should alleviate as much as we can of the pain and the suffering caused by war. So when you see that with the American Friends Service Committee and their work that they did in World War I, they didn't have ambulance units in the war, so the Friends went in and they opened up hospitals and went to the front lines to pull the people out and give them care. And they did it for both sides. And after the war was done, they stayed and they helped rebuild the lives of the people there.
Modern military medics have to treat both sides too. Of course, sides on the enemy side sometimes have guards and stuff like that, but yeah, they are supposed to treat both sides with no change in level of care or anything like that. They're supposed to treat both sides equally on
Yeah.
care.
And a lot of that comes from the work that the Friends Service Committee did. So, because at the time they didn't have that policy, and now it's part of the Geneva Convention. So,
On that note, don't shoot the medic that will be treating you if you get shot.
yeah.
Just a side note. I know that story.
So is it easy to have a testimony of peace in our world today? Or in Fox's day?
Apparently not.
It's easier today than it was in Fox's time.
But then there's things like 9/11 where it's not easy.
No.
When you know that they're going to attack you whether or not you respond, what do you do?
So it's just one of those things where you have to sit in the static there's no real good answer. Because even those that are ardent supporters of war know that war is terrible and it shouldn't happen.
I think in terms of don't force me into having that being my only option,
Mm-hmm.
and then we don't have to worry about it being the option that I choose.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it was even right after 9/11, it's still incredibly unlikely that you as an individual are going to be hurt by a foreign
Yeah.
threat. But you still felt that. You felt that, like, fervor and call to defense, that it wasn't necessary.
One of my roommates lost his grandmother.
I'm not saying nobody got hurt or
Yeah,
died.
I
I'm
know.
saying
It's,
out of
It's
the
still unlikely
millions of
that-
people in America, we all felt that threat, even if it wasn't actually real for the vast majority of us. You know, a tiny
we
percentage.
weren't
of us.
hit that day, but we were worried that they were going to follow up with further examples of that if we let them slide with that.
Right, but
That was my thought on that, pretty much.
Well, I remember when they allowed the planes to fly again.
Mhm.
It literally scared me because I worked outside at the time. So
Mhm.
I was in Kansas City doing lawn care.
It changed everything.
And I remember when it happened because I was writing a report and heard it on the news as I was writing the report for the person's yard, and pretty much everything stopped. Everybody came back to the office and we all just left.
It changed
And then
it changed policy on how they flew the planes. Like before that, they were told to let them have the cockpit, and
oh yeah.
because they thought that they weren't suicidal. And
Mm-hmm.
but did it change your belief about war as a Quaker?
No.
no,
Okay.
In fact, it made it even stronger.
Right.
So, but yeah, the fear is definitely there.
Their own people.
The desire to use force to make my point is still there.
Or justified.
Yeah. Even with my own children, I have to take a step back sometimes because I'll say, do it because I told you to, because I'm the authority. And if you don't, I'm going to spank you. I have to take a step back from that because am I explaining this properly to them so that they understand the importance of this? Or am I just beating them, enforcing them, and just continuing this cycle of using force is okay? Luckily, even though my parents did spank me often, and I deserved most of it, they took the time to explain to me why they needed to do that. So I always knew what the consequences were and where I went wrong. And as soon as I stopped crying, they stopped spanking me. And they went on to different ways to prove the point. So,
But they could have used a different, I mean, we spanked our kids too, but we
Yeah.
could have used different ways to begin with, but we didn't.
Yeah.
So is there a reason for it?
Really, there isn't.
Gideon acts like he gets spanked all the time, he literally, like,
So-
counts on one hand for his lifetime compared to his brothers. And he asked, like, those third kids, he asked no question. He's like, but why? And you have to ask yourself, why? Why didn't I instead take more time to, find alternatives or?
so I kind of laugh because I only spanked my oldest son once, and he remembers it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you gotta do the bunch so that.
Well,
No. We are not endorsing that.
we're not endorsing everybody on YouTube. We're not endorsing that.
You said there's no right way though. You said there's no right way. So.
I only did once, and it's because he is telling me that my cooking sucked. So I thought he's just being argumentative. I don't want to eat my dad's food because my mom's
Did
a
you eat
better
your
cook.
cooking that particular day?
I spanked him and made him sit and eat, and then I took a bite, and I turned to him and I said, I am sorry I spanked you. This sucks. Let's go get Burger King. So
Oh gosh.
that opened up in my mind. I can be wrong, and I need to really think hard before I do something, because he was justified in his actions. And he could have done it in a better way, but he is 3. He didn't know the words. So
You knew that word.
he knew this, yeah.
You know enough to get
He knew enough to get his point across, but not in a polite way. So we worked on being polite. But it is something that we look at a nation and we almost give nations a pass, and we expect more out of ourselves when it's close in our family. But each of those relationships, they are just human relationships. So if you're talking about husband and wife, you can have that same dynamic between the United States and England because we're allies. So if you're not taking care of your ally as a nation, you're driving them to
not be an ally.
not be an ally. So you have to court your allies just like you would your spouse. If you're going to use force, are we clearly saying why we're using it and giving them a way out?
That is definitely an important part of it.
So we want to think that it's huge and we can't think of it, but a lot of times if we do personalize it and make it something more, how would you react with a coworker in this? In a lot of cases it can translate over. It's just bigger scale. And you're dealing with more people.
Well, there's more consequences too.
Yeah.
So how would you act? Well, kids is probably the better one because there's, very few.
If someone did, if you reverse the positions and they did what you just did in the situation, would you think they were in the wrong? It's a pretty easy way to look at it, I would think.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect way of looking at it, but it's definitely an easy way to try to gauge it. I mean,
So for most of my life, like you said, it's better to fight the war over there than here. I've changed my position on that too, because that's how I used to think. Yeah, let's keep it all over there. Keep it in Europe, keep it in Africa, keep it in Asia. I don't want it here. But I got to thinking, well, if that was my personal relationship with the person living next to me, it's the same concept. And I'm repeating myself, yeah. But do I actually have the right to damage their property to make my point?
I think it's a great point, Jared, because I mean,
sometimes they pick they pick the battlefield themselves and they say, yeah, let's fight here.
Yeah.
And it happens to be, yeah. Not always, but it has happened on occasion.
And
sometimes people get caught in the crossfire, and that's not good.
is it okay to put an alarm system in your house? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to defend your borders.
lack of faith. Just kidding.
But what are you going to do if something does happen? How are you going to handle it?
There's
Do you
news
have a
stories
plan?
today about that. There's news stories related to that very concept today. I'm not going to bring them up
Yeah.
beyond that, though.
So then going into what Tracy read, they were ashamed of Fox that he was in jail for religious belief. Why did that cause shame to his family?
Well, because you view jail as a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have done something wrong to be in jail, don't you?
Yeah.
Might threaten your position in society.
And his father was called Righteous Christer. So he was a well-respected person in the community. He wasn't rich by any means, but he had respect.
In some countries, they don't generally just leave it to one person. In certain countries, I'm not saying that Britain at that point or anything like that, but some countries have been known to, for the sins of one, to punish everybody related to them.
Yeah, in North Korea, they have a policy that if you do something wrong, then your children are punished, as well as your parents. So it's a 3-generation get thrown in jail.
I literally just watched a K-drama talking about that exact policy, yeah.
So here's we're not getting too far into
Well,
chapter
he was
4.
in
So.
prison for blasphemy, so that would be shameful back then,
Yeah.
right? So it's not that he was, in prison for religion. It's like, I mean, yeah, for religion, but it was for blasphemy against the state religion. So
Which
that
was
was,
the church.
I mean, when you phrase it like that, it kind of changes the understanding of why his parents would be ashamed of that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't feel bad. Like I don't look at his parents
Past 8.
Yeah.
like why are they feeling ashamed? I think that makes sense. Like my son's blasphemy, in prison for it.
Yeah. So it brings shame to the whole family. So we're almost done.
Okay.
So I was moved to write to the judges concerning their putting men to death for cattle and money and small matters, and to show them how contrary it was to the law of God in old time. For I was under great suffering in my spirit because of it, and under the very sense of death. But standing in the will of God, a heavenly breathing arose in my soul to the Lord. Then did I see the heavens open, and I rejoiced and gave glory to God. So I wrote to the judges as follows. I am moved to write unto you to take heed of putting men to death for stealing cattle or money, etc. For thieves in the old times were to make restitution, and if they had not wherewith, they were sold for their theft. Mind the laws of God in the Scriptures, and the Spirit that gave them forth. Let them be your rule in executing judgment, and show mercy, and you may receive mercy from God, the judge of all. Take heed of gifts and rewards, and of pride, for God doth forbid them. They blind the eyes of the wise. I did not write to give liberty to sin. God hath forbidden it. But that you should judge according to his laws, and show mercy, for he delights in true judgment and in mercy. I beseech you to mind these things, and prize your time. Now you have it. Fear God and serve him, for he is a consuming fire.
Again, back to the concept of judge the way you want to be judged type
Yeah.
deal.
So at that time, there were hundreds of capital offenses in England. So he's saying this isn't right. Just have them pay back the price of the cattle that they stole, and that should be enough. So what would you say his stance is on capital punishment?
Sounds like he's pretty much against it.
Yeah.
Was he expressly against it, like, period?
And that's what it sounds like.
That's an excellent question.
Though, does he ever mention any specific cases where he's okay with the concept, like for murder?
I don't think he ever really says it, but in Penn, in Pennsylvania, there were only a few capital crimes, and murder was one of them. Where in the rest of the colonies, they were much like England at that time, very liberal in their use of the hanging and the various,
Crucible.
yeah. Hence, Mary Dyer was hung for preaching.
Drowning, hanging, fire.
So,
Though only like 20 cases of that actually happened. But,
so from this quote, would George Fox regard any offense worthy of capital punishment?
they specifically said reasons for not doing it,
But to me, that implies that there are reasons to do it if you're gonna
which
specifically.
he didn't necessarily say that either.
Yeah.
But yes, you are right, that it could be inferred that there are things that could he
So,
would okay on.
how did he encourage the judges to respond? Or what should they look into? What did the law of
the
God?
spirit of the law that they are claiming to be holding.
Yeah.
They should rely more on the law of God, which is showing mercy in all
Mhm.
things.
So, if you look at the Old Testament, we like to bring up all the capital cases in the Old Testament. But really, according to ancient legal codes, the Old Testament's pretty merciful. So, in a lot of cases, we like to think, oh, the Old Testament's very sexist. Yes, it is. But is it more sexist than Babylon? Or is it more liberating than Babylon? The reality is it gave women much more rights than Babylon did. And that might be a terrible example, but Rome actually gave women more rights than the Bible did. So there's pluses and minuses, but in this he's saying let's look back at Scripture. How did Scripture deal with stealing a cattle? Or even how did Scripture deal with somebody accidentally killing
It had
animal?
sanctuary cities.
And yeah, if you accidentally killed somebody out of self-defense or something like that, you were allowed to go to a sanctuary city.
But you had to kind of stay there until the Avenger of Blood was no longer after you.
Yeah,
Like you either made peace with them or
yeah.
they died off or whatever.
And if it was deemed an accident, you still had a responsibility to pay restitution for
Of course,
their life.
that wasn't an okay for everybody to suddenly. Oh, I accidentally stabbed him 16 times. No,
Yeah.
it was. That wasn't what that law was there for.
Yeah.
It was.
The first one was an accident.
So it's one of those things where, again, he's telling us or encouraging us to take a step back. Let's look through it. Let's talk it through. Let's have a conversation about this.
I keep thinking of triage and some things that are definitely controversial in current society about death penalty versus abortion, and those two ends being argued about.
So the current belief among Friends is about capital punishment, and you'd be surprised that this is one of the areas that's argued about. So is War and Peace. Friends aren't as united as you might think about these things.
It was a
Worldwide
dividing
or
point for
Huh?
several.
worldwide or in America?
Both. So,
War's been a dividing point between
Having capital
various
Yeah.
groups of Quakers
so
when they
the
did divide.
Quakers in Kiev really want Russia to leave. And they're struggling right now trying to express their testimony of peace when they know that somebody's could literally kill them at any given evening. So it's difficult. So this is what the Faith and Practice says about capital punishment. The Bible emphasizes the sacredness of human life and the worth of each person before God. Capital punishment, Friends feel, is preemption of the authority of God, the righteous judge, over life. The restraint of evil can be more effectively handled by other methods than the death penalty.
So, two related but different things. Again, triage versus death penalty versus abortion. What would you try to say first if you had no? In triage, you have to. You don't have enough resources to save everybody. So who do you save?
The ones that are more likely to live and benefit. So
You try to save as many as you can with
Yeah.
what you got. And related to that, if not, I know that there's an argument as to death penalty versus abortion, and people get all worked up on both of those, and rightly in some cases, and wrongly in some cases, in my opinion. But they're not, those aren't actually tied together, but if it's one of those two, if you were going to prioritize one or the other, which one should be the higher priority there on saving?
Yeah.
If by they're not, by saying one, you don't necessarily negate the saving of another, but if that was the case, which one would be the one that you would try to save?
Well, according to what we've just read, it's not our place to make the judgment. So we shouldn't be, we should let God handle it.
Right,
So both with war or peace, war, and capital punishment, contemporary friends speak of an alternative to the use of violence. So what are some of those alternatives?
Well, first off, making sure you have alternatives.
Yeah.
That's the key point of that. If you are narrowed into a corner where that's your only option, then somewhere along the line you screwed up, or somebody screwed up.
There's always the option of allowing the person to make the demand, who is making the demands, to win, to give them what they want, to allow yourself to be beaten or killed or imprisoned.
Yeah, that's always an option. Is it
It's
always
not-
a good option?
Not often. It is an option,
So,
but it's not often. It's not
it
often
is-
one.
Yeah, what if it saves their soul? Then it's a good option, right? Like, what if it leads them to be like, man, this person, they could have whatever, but they chose to a different option, and you don't know what it's going to lead to.
So if we're going to think of, instead of thinking world peace, think of Kansas City peace. What do we need to resolve conflict in Kansas City? What are the things that are causing problems? So there's poverty.
Yeah, I was going to say clean up the bad places.
There's lack of housing.
How
There's
to clean them up?
Mow the lawn.
nastiness. Yeah.
How do you clean them up? Sometimes some people actually choose to have it bad.
Go mow the
And
lawn.
that doesn't make sense to me, but apparently some people actually choose to do that.
So some people just don't know better. So education is important. So there's lots of different things that we can contribute to that can alleviate some of this need for violence. So when we're talking about greed and jealousy and the other vices that James says that promote war, if we are to educate and teach about those things, then it may help others choose a different path. And that's what George Fox did in his testimony. He refused to fight in the war. He is thrown back in prison. He continued to live the life that he said that he claimed, and they again gave him the freedom to walk in the garden. And they listened to him when he started talking about capital punishment. So there was a lady that was going to get executed, and the judge, after receiving the letter from Fox, sent her back to prison instead. So sometimes the education and talking it through can be more beneficial than endorsing the violence. So where do we begin to work for peace?
Wherever we are, for starters.
Within ourselves.
It starts with ourselves. We have to take a different route, don't we? We have to stop thinking about my desires and what do I want and where am I using force to get what I want, and can I use different methods? And then you teach that to your children and everybody else. So that's pretty much where I came or got to. And I said, what are some ways that we can do this? There's a community in Colorado that closed down their jails. And they started to invest in counseling and getting life coaches, volunteer life coaches, to help people that were arrested for drug offenses and theft and stuff like that, and started to do different things instead of just sending them to prison or to jail. And crime actually went down quite a bit in that community. And it's not some liberal
I'm
pink
guessing it didn't go
communist
down,
area.
I'm guessing it did not go down to zero though, but
No.
hopefully it did actually improve it.
But many of the people that were being charged with the crimes have then finished school, and they got the treatment that they needed for drugs, and it improved their overall life, and their children are doing better in school after that. So it's one of those things where a lot of times our society gets tunnel vision. This is the only way that we can do things. And we can get even worse because we can get tunnel vision, right or left. And that's the only thing that we can do. Where sometimes if we take some of both sides, it works.
Did you ever hear about that thing that they did where they had a group of people just meditate on peace for a certain city and the crime rates reduced significantly?
Yeah, it can happen.
You heard of that thing that happened though?
I don't remember which city it was.
Yeah, I don't recall its name or whatever,
But usually it happens because they rose awareness of it. So people were,
you don't think that the prayers had anything to do with it?
I think prayers had a lot to do with it. But I think along with the prayers, we have to become active. And
Oh, I thought you were saying it's because
And-
they raised awareness about it and that's what caused it.
no, it's both and. So if you can say go and be filled, but if you don't feed them, then are they going to be filled? If you know they have a need.
That's a
I
different,
was just saying-
that's a different verse. That's a different
Yeah,
verse.
but if you know that there's
I'm
a
just
need.
saying like you were saying like some, how can we do things that
Yeah,
have a real effect on a city or a community? Like one of them was, changing the laws and providing more, like counseling instead of imprisonment. And I just gave another example. Well, here's another example that actually
Yeah.
worked, where they did consider like, what caused the reduction in crime. Well, there's nothing that they could point to except that they started this group of
Yeah.
people just like meditating on
Well,
peace in that area.
if you look at the history of how the Berlin Wall fell down or came down, a lot of that started
Were you
with
alive
prayer
when that
groups.
Probably not.
93.
Then yeah,
Okay.
I don't remember it.
And so
Yeah, that's why I was asking.
I
know
do because I'm old.
We
So-
were alive for that,
So-
but we were kids.
So is there anything else that you found in that chapter that was interesting? Because I literally covered like the first maybe 5 pages.
Out of 20, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot. So, but most of what is after this go along with the theme of those, just his interactions with the people and who he was meeting with. So,
It made me remember several situations that we had to think about while we were over there. Like, what if you're a soldier, but you're a medic also? And what if some guy takes a shot at you? They even hit you, but you're fine, or at least you're not going to die. And then your guys get him, and if you don't treat him, they're going to die. What do you do?
yeah. Hopefully it does make you think a little differently.
There's generally it's a good idea to not have the guy that just got shot by him be the medic for the person.
Yeah.
Just to saying that. Yeah, or if they never had this happen, but theoretical situation that has been thought of. What if bad guys attack a hospital that there are patients under your care, and you are a soldier. You are trained to fight.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? If you if you don't act, they will kill all your patients, and probably you too.
Well, you
Run, hide, fight.
you
That's
you,
what we're
you
trained
de-escalate the situation as best you can.
Yeah, well,
So-
we're definitely talking about they're not in a talking mood level.
Well, you can de-escalate.
Well, current training
So-
for like most places, like a hospital, is you get out. If there's an
Yeah.
active shooter, you get out, you run. You can't run? Okay, you hide, you barricade yourself in. Last option is defending yourself.
Yeah, and usually
Alright,
defense. and
that sounds more like a civilian hospital, though.
Right.
The
Oh, you're
military.
talking about a military hospital.
Yes, definitely military. That's why I was specifically saying military hospital.
I'm sure they'd be.
That's why I was mentioning a part about being a soldier.
Well, law enforcement is trained to
'Cause-
take out the shooter, right?
In a combat environment, every soldier has a weapon of whatever they're trained on.
yeah,
So,
but like I was saying, a lot of the things that apply in your community apply there as well. The same thing applies. If you can get people to a safer place, you get people to a safer place. It's called evacuation
yes.
or retreat. If you can't retreat, then you build defenses. If your defenses fail, then you have to choose. Are we going to kill them, or are we going to
Let them kill us.
let them kill us, or are we going to take action that will stop the violence and preserve the life?
Yeah, Tracy, if you were at a hospital and you had a gun in your holster or whatever, and someone came in and just started shooting patients, bang, 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 then I would say good job to you if you just killed that guy who's
Yeah.
shooting the patient.
I would.
But like maybe there's this alternate universe
Well,
where well hold on. Maybe there's this alternate universe where there's angels with you in that hospital and they stop that guy. Maybe that could happen. And if you believe the many stories where something like that does happen, it can happen. But at the same time, Tracy, if you're in that situation, if that thing happened, man, I would fully support you just taking that guy out. And listen, there's so much grace for you to do that. Like God's
If
like,
possible.
man, Tracy, why'd you do that? He's gonna say, Tracy, I love you and I appreciate you. That's, I mean,
Like
that's
if
all.
you
Just
manage
love
to
for
figure
you.
out a way to disarm them without
Yeah.
killing them, and none of your guys get killed, kudos,
Yep.
awesome. It's
And-
it's just not always an option. is
And
the
that's
thing.
why
That's even
we
better, man. Like, yeah, if you can,
But that
judo,
requires
if you can use your
some-
judo skills and get that gun out of their hands, it's even better.
Or be like in the animes or movies where you can
Dude,
shoot
if
the
you
gun
pull
out of
your
their hand, but I'm not
samurai
that good a
sword,
shot.
you just,
okay.
if you shoot their trigger.
Sorry,
So-
we're getting off
like-
topic here.
Like
Yeah.
Keiko's, what is it? Keiko's bill. If you get that trigger finger, that's even a better option.
Put my feet in
So
wild
that's
impression.
that's where the
You're-
last
you're
statement
supposed to shoot the
of
kill,
the
though.
faith and practice comes into play. We pray and support the families and those that serve, because no matter who you are, once you take a life, that's going to weigh on you. Even if it's justified, it's still going to weigh on you. So we have to encourage them and walk through that and let them know that the grace of God is sufficient. And can we direct your life in a different path? So it is, there's a lot of questions that are left unanswered because there is no answer. Suffering happens.
Sometimes
The
you
world
just gotta wrestle
sucks.
and make a brand new friend.
And sometimes
Huh.
our best attempts aren't good enough. But
Problem with that
should we
is they
continue
usually
to
have
try?
some bomb vests or something like that attached as well.
And cover it to save the others.
I've
Cover it with your
noticed
body.
that we're discussing two different types of situations.
We are.
Mhm.
The first is, for example, disputes in our community where we
Yes.
have time to discuss things and find alternate solutions and work things out. The
And I'm speaking
other
like that.
situation is when there
lost
is
the
no time to think about anything. You have to react based on what you've been
Right, they've
trained
taken
to
away the
do or
option
your
to
instincts.
talk and work it out, yes.
So
That's
for those
the other thing.
situations, it's best to have conversations like these long in advance, so that we can retrain our minds and
Yeah.
our instincts to react the way that we would want to react in those non-thinking situations.
Yeah.
Whoop, whoop.
And it goes back to, you know, that's why we have periodic meetings with NATO.
I do have a question for after this.
So that's why there's lines of communication. That's why there's the red phone between the Kremlin and the White House, is to keep those lines of communication open. So hopefully we can come to a better solution.
Or we can just stop worrying and learn to love the bomb.
And
Oh, wait, that's a movie.
yeah, and so far it's worked.
What was that?
Or love the drums.
Oh,
So-
babe, no.
So going forward,
You've been listening about New Jersey.
next week is finding answers together. So if you have a question, then let me know soon so I can research it. If not, we'll just go over a query. Which I like the queries. You may not like the queries, but I think they're wonderful. And then in 2 weeks it'll be another Holy Silence session. So
Are we meeting next week? Tuesday, Christmas Eve?
no, we will not meet next week. So
So it'll be
2
New
weeks.
Year's Eve.
Yeah. Well,
Oh.
maybe we'll take 2 weeks off. How about
Yes,
that?
You were definitely
2
correct
weeks
when we
off.
talked about two different situations.
Or
One
we
where
could
you
have
the
a
option
party.
to
We
try
could,
talking. And one
silence
where that
till
option has been
midnight.
taken away.
So
They've just
we'll
gone
take
straight
2
to
weeks off,
acting on it.
and we'll meet after the new year, and we'll find answers together, which gives you many more questions to ask. So
And our
questions
soldiers
like,
generally find
is
themselves in
Christmas
that second
pagan?
situation.
So
That's a main problem with that.
so did you have anything else to add, Michael?
Oh my.
No, you guys have a happy Christmas.
You as
All
well.
right, thank you.
Merry Christmas.
And we'll talk to you
Yeah, we
later.
were some of these people were actually doing music earlier today, like while you guys
So-
were on your way here. You saw it and stuff.
We'll talk to you later, Michael.
Now, are we off the air yet?
Oh no. Oh,
I have a question, and I don't want to endorse any product or anything like that. So I wanted to make sure that we're off the air before I say this question.
Okay.
Are we off?
Abstinence is the only way. Oh my god. My plan. Oh, listen. I only got a plan A.
Yes, we are now.